In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do one of these speedster type of videos. And it is going to be pretty easy to do. I'll walk you through the steps. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to do File, New, and I'm going to do New Project. I'm going to choose New Composition from Footage, and I'm going to choose my footage just so I can show you the raw footage, because you're going to need to know what you would need to film to do this. So I walk out. After I start the camera, I walk out, look at my watch, and then I kind of just jog off. So what you'll need to do is film yourself where you look at your watch or a phone, look surprised, and then jog off as if you're late for something. Now, when you do this, make sure that you are using either a tripod or you have the camera stabilized, because you don't want to have to do any image stabilization on this or motion tracking for this particular project. So if you haven't done so already, go out and film your footage. Do make sure that you have a section in there where you are not running, because you're going to need that for the trail of lightning. And then also make sure that when you run off, that you completely leave the screen for this particular project, because we're going to need to make sure that you're gone from the frame to have the effect we're going for. All right, once you've filmed that, we're going to go ahead and start to speed things up. So I'm going to speed up this clip. I'm going to speed it up from after I look at my watch and I'm surprised, and then I start to turn. So maybe about here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layer and Time, Enable Time Remapping. And when I do that, it puts a little clock right here, and it adds a couple of keyframes. I'm going to leave those keyframes, but I'm going to add a keyframe from this moment when I'm going to start going fast. To add a keyframe, I click this diamond right there, and then I'm going to add another keyframe at the point at which I am gone from the video. So there you can see I exit right there, and about there is where I want it to be sped up till. So I added those two keyframes. Now, in order to speed up this video, all I need to do is grab the one that's on the right, and I'm compressing time. So I'm making that event take shorter. So there we go. So I've sped it up, and I've run out. And I suppose if you wanted to, you could be done with it, but that's not really the effect we're going for. Next thing I want to do is split these pieces into 3, and that is going to make it easier to do our effects later. But before I split them, I'm going to trim off the excess. So I think I want to start it right here where I'm looking off that way. So I'm going to grab my work area bar and I'm going to pull it in. And then I'm going to do the same for the right side. After I have left and before I walk back in, I'm going to trim it off, and maybe at about 10 seconds or so. For this particular clip, I'm going to grab my work area bar handle here, not the whole thing, just the handle, and shrink it down so that that is the length of my clip. Now you notice I still have the other stuff because I haven't trimmed my composition to the work area bar. After I've collapsed my work area bar like that, or shrink it down, then I'm going to go to Composition and Trim Comp to Work Area. And now that's the length of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and split this. So I'm going to this first keyframe here that I can see, and I'm going to go Edit and Split Layer. And then I'm going to go to that second keyframe, and same thing, I'm going to go to Edit, Split Layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and name these. So I'm going to select my first one, and I hit Enter on the keyboard, and I can name this. I'm going to name this Watch. And then I'm going to select the second one, hit Enter, and I'm going to name this Run. And I'm going to get the third one, and that's this end one over here, and I'm going to hit Enter, and I'm going to rename this one Gone. And now I have the 3 clips named. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of an effect here because yes, though I'm running, it looks like I'm running faster, it's a little comical, and I want to add some different types of blurs. So I'm going to come to my effects and presets, and in here I'm going to type echo, and then I'm going to get the echo effect and drag it to my running section. Now you notice it brightens up, and I'm going to change that because currently the echo operator is add. I'm going to change it instead to maximum. Now you can see a little bit of that effect, but I only have one echo, so I'm going to change this to 12 echoes. So now there's a lot more of me there, but I want to change this decay. I'm going to bring that decay down, and you can kind of experiment with your look. I'm going to choose maybe this 0.8 or 0.81. Depends on how your footage looks. Now even that, I suppose, after I play it, I'm rendering it, that might work for you, but we're going to do another effect because although I've got that echo effect going, I don't have a blur, and I could do motion blur, but if I do the motion blur here and enable motion blur, it is not going to be the same. So I'm not going to be doing that type of motion blur. I'm going to do something called force motion blur. And if I start to type force in my presets, then there's this CC force motion blur. And I'm going to apply that to the clip. And I'm getting a little bit more of a blur there. And I'm going to choose motion blur samples. I'm going to choose 12, I think, for this as well. And now I think that looks a little bit better in the way it moves. Now it does take longer for it to do the render for that preview, but you can kind of see it's a little bit blurrier, and I think that works a little bit better. Now, again, you could be done at that point, but it doesn't have the lightning or the light effects, so we will continue with this. But there you can kind of see that effect as it works. The next thing I want to do after I have sped it up and I've added my echo and my motion blur is I want to add the lightning. Now, in order to add the lightning, I'm going to add a layer and choose New Solid. And I'll just choose a black solid here. And I'm going to call this one Lightning. And I'm going to move it to my top layer. Now, don't worry that it covered over. We're going to be taking care of that. I'm going to go ahead and trim it by grabbing the edge here. And I just want it to start at this, but that's okay that we see this black right now because we're going to get rid of that. And I'm going to come back to my effects and presets, and I'm going to type in lightning. And I'm going to be choosing the thing that says generate advanced lightning. I'm going to grab and put that on this black layer. Now you notice that there is some lightning there, but it doesn't move at all. It's just kind of static or not moving on that frame, but it's not on the video. It is above it, and it's applied to this layer that was previously black. Next thing I want to do is figure out what type of lightning I want. Now I don't want direction lighting, I want a lightning strike. Now I've got an origin point and a direction. So I'm going to go ahead and at the beginning of this section here, that's where I'm going to be speeding up. I'm going to click on this crosshair and I'm going to add that just to my shoulder area. And then I'm going to grab the direction and I'm going to pull that up right next to the other one so that it just exists right up there. I can pull it out a little bit so you can see what it looks like. So this is the origin where it's going to start. This is where the end is going to be. Eventually we are going to tuck it back over here, but I'm going to adjust this lightning anyway. So right now by default it's just this blue lightning, And I'm going to keyframe this a little bit later, but I want to get my lightning look down first. So I'm going to go to my core settings, and I'm going to change the core maybe to something a little bit of a light yellowish orange. Maybe that'll do. Now it doesn't look that different. That's just the core. I want to do the glow settings. I'm going to change the glow for this, and maybe I want to make it kind of on the reddish orange. And now I've got the lightning. Again, it is not moving. It's just right there. But I can do other effects as well, adjust the turbulence. So that'll be up to you how you want to change things. The defaults will work for the most part for this particular project, but you can adjust them and see kind of how that looks. After you've kind of figured that out, you are going to go ahead and tuck that direction back up there so they're kind of right next to each other. And at that point, I'm going to turn on the clock for origin and direction. And then I'm going to move forward a few frames. And now it's hard to grab just the origin here because it's right next to the direction. So I'm going to click this crosshair, and I'm going to select an area where I want it to go. So that's my shoulder, so it's going to kind of be following me. But now I know definitely which of the two is the direction. It's this one here, so I'm going to pull it down a little bit. And then I'm going to go a little bit further in time. Same thing. Now I can just grab this, and maybe I'll bring it up a little bit more. Just go a few frames, and just kind of keep following yourself, tracing that. And as I go further away, then it's as though that lightning is trailing me. And then I'm going to go to the edge, and now I'm beyond this particular clip. I'm going to pull the lightning out, and I'm also going to take this. I'm going to go a little bit further because I want it as though the lightning is still kind of going after I passed, and then I'm going to bring it out. Now you notice a little bit of a glow right there still, but that's okay. And now let's take a look at that. So we see the lightning kind of follows me, and I'm gone, and then the lightning leaves the frame. Now I want to trim this lightning layer because I don't need that full length anymore. I'm going to expand these just so I can make sure I know where that last key frame is, and that's going to be under my effects. And then here I can see that last diamond. So I'm just going to go over the last diamond, and I'm going to pull this in because I don't need the lightning to continue after that. Then I can collapse those effects on the lightning layer. Now, it looks okay, but I don't like how it is blending with the background. So the next thing I want to do is I want to change the blending mode for this lightning layer. In order to do that, I go to Layer, and then I can go to blending mode, and then I can select one of these. To cycle through them, you could just choose, you could press Shift and the plus or equals key, and it's going to cycle through the different blending modes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that so you can see what it looks like when I cycle through. I'm finding a spot, and I'm holding Shift and hitting the plus, and then you can see the different blending modes. And I know which one I think will look best, but I'm kind of just cycling through so you can see it. I don't want it to seem like it's just stuck on the top, but I want it to seem like it's part of the environment. And I think it's probably going to look best in maybe the screen or the lighten one. So then I'm going to come up here. I'll just show you blending mode, screen or lighten. So I'm going to choose, I think I'm going to choose screen for this. But I think that blends in a little bit better. And now again, you could be done with it. It looks pretty good, but I want to take things a little bit further. I want to add some lights to this. So that means I'm going to be creating a three-dimensional environment. In order to add lights, I can just go to the layer menu. Before I do that, I'm going to turn a couple of these layers on to becoming 3D layers. So I'm going to start with my run layer, and I'm going to go to this block right here and click this, and now this has become a three-dimensional layer. And that's going to allow it to interact with lights. And I'm going to do the same for the clip where I'm gone. I'm going to make that a 3D layer because I want it to be affected by some lights that I'm going to add. In order to add the lights, I'm going to go to Layer, New, and I'm going to choose Light. Now, the first one I'm going to do is a point light, just so you can kind of see this. And I'm going to choose a point light that is a little bit kind of on the yellowish, orangish, but kind of light. Maybe that'll do. Make sure that you don't choose one like this because it's not going to give the effect that you want. But it has a little bit of color to it, and not too much, no gray. And then I'm doing point light, and the intensity we're going to have at 100%. We can leave the radius at 500. Now when I do that, you'll notice that all of a sudden the rest of the frame gets dark. That's because there's no ambience to this. So this layer, a 3D layer, will respond to a light if it's there. Now I'm going to take and shorten this or shrink that layer. But again, you see that it goes from bright daylight to all of a sudden dark. That is no big deal. We are going to take care of that easily by adding a second light. The second light we are going to add, we're going to go to Layer, New, and we're going to choose Light. This time we're going to choose Ambient. Now the color for the ambient light needs to be white because that is going to be used to illuminate my background and my footage. And then I'm going to leave the intensity at 100% and just leave this the way it is. And then once I click OK, there it is. The color has gone back to normal. Might look a little bit bright because I have that point light there. I'm going to shrink this layer, same thing, or I'm going to trim off that edge because I don't need it above that. Now it does get bright all of a sudden, and this light does not move. I want it to seem like the light is moving through the scene. So I'm going to leave the ambient light alone, and I'm going to go to that point light. Now the point light, what I need to do with it is I need to figure out where I want it to start. To move the point light, I can grab either the X and the Y. I don't want to grab the Z because I'm going to bring that, I would be bringing it either closer or further away from this video clip, and I don't want to move it in three-dimensional space that way. So if you just go to your arrow here, I can go to the transform and the position. I'm going to leave the Z place position, and then I can adjust these. So you can see as I move that, I'm moving it in the X, or I can move it in the Y. I could just grab these arrows. If you do that, just make sure you're only grabbing the light and not the video footage like that I just grabbed. I just grabbed the lightning layer. I'm going to undo that. So it might be easier for you to just adjust it using the numbers, just clicking and dragging them. And then let's say it's going to kind of be bright right there. But I feel like it's a little bit bright, and all of a sudden it gets bright. It goes from daylight to boom, bright. And I think I want it to ramp up a little bit. Easy to do, so I've selected that layer, and I'm going to go to my light options. And in the beginning of my point light, I'm going to turn the intensity clock on. And I'm going to drop that intensity to 0. And then I'm going to go just a few frames forward. That lightning is starting, and then I'm going to take that intensity to 100. And now it kind of ramps up. But it doesn't move. You'll notice it stays right here, and yet I'm moving over this way. So in order for it to kind of follow me, in the transform, I'm going to turn that, I'm going to go back to the beginning of it here, the beginning of that light, and in the transform, I'm going to turn that position on. So at this point in time, it's fine that it is where it is. I'm going to go a little bit further in time and say, well, now that I'm over here, that light should go this way. I might also expect that the further away it gets, the dimmer it gets. But I'm first going to just do the position. So I'm going to move it just down a little bit, and I'm going to move it over. So now it's as though it's kind of illuminating me, following me. I'm going a little bit further in time, and I'll move it. And same thing, further in time, and moving it. So that area of the screen is getting brighter as I do that. Or not necessarily brighter, but the area that is bright is changing. And then I'm going to go off frame like that. So that bright spot moves with me, and it gets bright in that area. Now, if I want to, I can also, again, maybe dim it a little bit over time. That would be up to you. And then that would be under those light options. Maybe I want it to stay that 100 intensity to about here. So I'm going to turn a keyframe on here. So that's going to stay, it's going to go from 0 to 100, stay at 100, and then maybe at this point, maybe I want the intensity down to 60, and then I'll go to the very end of that area where it's, I don't need it to have any intensity. So if I've left the frame, the lightning is gone, then I'm going to take that intensity down to 0. So it's kind of, it fades out as I leave the screen. And you'll notice that if you try and render this, hit the space bar, it's definitely going to take a bit longer. And if you don't like the brightness of it, you can change that. You can change how it interacts. If you want more lightning, you can grab more lightning and put more on you as well. But I just thought it would be simple to add a single lightning. And then you can kind of see that effect. And then I've left. I'm going to add just one more effect to this. And that effect is going to be a lens flare. In order to add the lens flare, I'm going to add a new layer, but I'm going to add instead in here, I'm going to add an adjustment layer. Now I want that adjustment layer at the top, above everything else. I also don't want it to start until the section where things are getting brighter and the lightning shows up. Then I'm going to come over to my effects and presets, and I'm going to look up lens, and I'm going to grab the generate lens flare, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to apply it to my adjustment layer. Then I've got that bright light right there. I'm going to move it perhaps to my shoulder. Now it starts all of a sudden and it doesn't move. So I'm going to be changing the brightness of it, and I'm also going to be changing its position. So once I've positioned it where I kind of want it to start, I'm going to take that clock and turn the flare brightness on here, and I'm going to drop the flare brightness to 0. I'm going to go forward just a couple of frames, and I'm going to take that flare brightness and brighten it up a little bit. Now I wouldn't take it all to 100, but you can kind of experiment with it, what works for your scene, but then you can kind of see that lens flare effect. And then, but again, this is just at that point in time, the brightness. Now, in order to have it move, I'm going to go back to the beginning of that, and I'm going to turn the clock on for flare center, and I'm going to move forward in time, and then I'm just going to move it, and you'll notice that whole flare effect is moving with me now. And then I can move forward in time, same thing, and I'm going to move that, move forward in time, move it. You can see that effect still working, and then kind of going out of frame, take that lens flare, take it all the way out, and then now I don't want it to be really there after I'm gone from the frame, So I'm going to take that adjustment layer and just trim it to the edge there. So then it goes with the same with the lightning layer. And then that is the effect. Now if I wanted to, normally with Adobe After Effects you're not bringing in audio, but you could bring in some audio to make this create a sound effect. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I have some audio that might work for this. I'm going to use this fire torch, import it, and I can drag it in underneath this. And now I've got this sound effect that sounds like a whoosh of some fire. Now again, it takes a little bit of time to render this, and you might experiment with this. The look depends on your lighting conditions, so I wouldn't necessarily just use the numbers that I've used. But it's almost done with the render, and that's just a preview of it. You can see the lightning as it kind of finished, the lens flare ended, and then now there are other things that you could do for this as well. Add other sound effects. Maybe you want to change the sound of this running one because it's, again, it sounds kind of comical. Normally, like I said, you wouldn't do audio in After Effects, but if you wanted to keep it all in After Effects, simple thing. I'm just going to grab the bass and treble, apply it to my run one. I'm going to drop that treble and increase the bass, and then it's going to sound a little bit better. It has a lower tone, and that is pretty much how you would accomplish that effect. I hope you enjoy it and that you can continue to experiment with visual and special effects.